Little pep talk. I think this is important for a lot of people. A lot of people in the Gen Z generation, their biggest problem is they simply weren't exposed to life enough. What I mean by that is, in the earlier generations, the parents were more apt to just kick them out and toss their kids to the wolves because they knew it was instilled into them, and it's a long time tradition where your child's whole point is to be successful and to be a legacy to the family. And the newer generations, particularly the boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials, when they had kids, they were taught that the whole point of having kids is to protect your kids and have them live a better life than you. But when they think better life, they think easier life. They don't think more glorious, more honorable, or any of those things. And this has led to a generation of kids and children who, for lack of a better term, were coddled and were not instilled values that would allow them to be successful, hardened individuals capable of succeeding in the real world. And this is why you have so many kids, or I guess many of them are adults now, Generation Z people, who are coming to age and completely lost. They don't know what to do. They have no idea how to make it, how to succeed in any realm. And they're seeking out a masculine, capable guidance that pushes to challenge them, which is not either of their parents usually. Now, I'm not saying every single one of the people in this generation are like this, but a large amount are. It can lead them to either take unnecessary risks, or it leads them down the road of bad influences that just preach hedonism and degeneracy and stuff like that. But either way, the root cause can pretty easily be seen as the parents simply having the wrong goals for their kids. Instead of thinking that their kids should become strong-minded, hard-working, hardened individuals, they thought, I want my kid to have an easier life than me. But an easy life will get you nowhere, and it will not make you a valuable person. The most valuable people had hard lives. So, this has a benefit and a disadvantage. The benefit is it kind of breaks the cycle because the Generation Z kids are at a point where their lives are so easy that when they make it into the real world, their life becomes extremely difficult. So they must either succeed and learn for themselves how to make it in the world and become hardened, or they shrivel up and die. Now, I don't mean that in the literal sense, but I mean that in the metaphorical sense, and maybe the literal sense, but primarily the metaphorical sense, where they rot or they become homeless or whatever. But you're left with two options. You either succeed or you completely fall apart. And the more you fall apart, the more the incentive is to push yourself forward. Now, that's the advantage, actually, because it does break the cycle. But the disadvantage is a bit more sinister because, sure, there might be a cycle being broken, but they also have the great challenge of trying to become successful and hardened after their formative years where it's very easy to become a certain person. So they have to consciously work towards becoming a good person or a hardened person or a successful person or all of the above, because they can't just be morphed by their environment anymore. Once you get out of your teenage years, your brain starts settling down. And I know the thing you always hear is, oh, your brain matures at 25. I'm not 100% on that. I don't agree with that 100%. I think that in your late teens, early 20s, you're pretty much where you are going to be as far as formative years, where your core memories, so to speak, are formed and stuff like that. Once you reach like early 20s, you're pretty much there already. And then at that point, it's up to you to change yourself. And you may be more ignorant than a person who's 25, but your brain capabilities, your mental cognitive capabilities are nearing their peak. I'm not saying they're at their peak, but they're nearing their peak. So it's very difficult for these Zoomers who've gone through the bulk of their maturation completely unprepared for the real world. But this is ultimately why I think that if you are a Gen Z person and you're disappointed with where your life is headed, the best possible thing you can do is become independent. And I'd hate to say it because it sounds almost cult-like, right? Separate the kids from the family or whatever. But you're going to have to detach yourself from your parents. You're going to have to alienate them in a way. Maybe you can keep in touch with them, but you got to stop sharing your personal life with them, every little personal aspect. And you got to stop constantly keeping in touch with them. You got to learn to form your own relationships and form your own path and take your own risks and start learning without any outside influence that's trying to get you to act in a way which they believe is ideal, which in your parents' case is usually, I want my kid to be safe. I want my kid to have an easier life than mine. Instead of a better life, instead of a more honorable life, it's always easier. I don't want my kid to have a challenging life. And that ideology is the root cause of why so many people are so soft in these younger generations. Their parents, they did not instill in them any true values that are abstract, such as respect, honor, and all of these things. They don't really mean anything to them. And even if they tried teaching them these things a little bit, they were so brought up by the system, which has become all-encompassing, that it's hard to, have their minds be in a place that is moldable for success. And the truth is, even if the parent has the right intentions, often they don't know what it takes to succeed in the modern world. A lot of what these old conservative boomer parents, Gen Xers, whatever, a lot of what they believe is very fear-based. And what I mean by that is, the internet. Don't want my kid on the internet. The internet's scary. Yeah, the internet can have some negative influence on you. But imagine going through your early teenage years without a phone while all your peers have one, and all of your peers are learning how to court girls with their phone, and they're learning how to communicate and network with their phone. And here you are, the one kid who doesn't get to learn these very essential things in their core developmental years. The reality is that well-intentioned, relatively conservative mindset of, I don't want my kid on his phone, I don't want him getting influenced by the internet, it's potentially damaging to them, and it could leave them behind. They might grow up and they might be 17, 18, 19 before they get their first phone, and there are kids like this who get to that point and they don't know how to socialize or interact with anybody, and they're completely cast out. They're outcasts. They can't succeed in any realm, whether it be a networking realm, a dating realm, or anything like that. So it's fucked. It really is fucked. Even the most well-intentioned, hardcore parents often fuck up and can damage the delicate development of their children. And like I said, all of this leads to the situation where the kid whose parents is trying to make their lives an easier life than their own end up completely unprepared for reality, which, let's face it, it's not as cozy as the idealistic media puts it out to be. You just go to college, you get a job, and you become successful, and it's happily ever after, and we keep pushing for good and better and nice. And it's going to be it's a kinder and gentler world, and your kid's going to be fine. The reality is, it's not a kinder and gentler world. It's a harsh, cruel reality. To close it off, I think my final advice would be, if you're a Gen Z young adult, you have to alienate yourself from your parents, because the longer you stay attached to them and dependent upon them, the harder it's going to be to mature and to develop and grow and harden yourself to the harsh realities of the real world, because ultimately a lot of what their goals are center around making your life easy, and they're not going to be around forever, and they definitely can't help you in some of the most important realms, especially when it comes to social circles and dating and stuff like that. It's just they can't help you in those things. They won't. They can try, but it's probably not going to succeed. And they usually won't, because it's just not something that they have any capacity to help you in. So you have to alienate yourself from your family, at least for a temporary amount of time, until you get to a point where you feel comfortable with who you are, from a point of view that is strength. Not necessarily, oh, I'm comfortable in my own shoes, I feel good, but rather, I'm comfortable with how strong I am, and I believe that I am very capable now. Now I can get myself back in touch with my family. Ultimately, the solution for many Gen Z people who may feel shut in or alienated or isolated or atomized is you got to throw yourself out into the fire, and you've got to cut your ties with people who have, let's face it, rendered you very dependent upon them. A change of environment's important. The people you've been around with, that you've basically lived amongst and been influenced by, your influencers that you've had for all these years, clearly have not been the solution to your problems. Because if they were an influence worthy of making you stronger, then you would already be strong. So you have to move yourself into an environment where you seek out an influence, or not even seek out an influence, but rather are influenced by the harshness of your reality to succeed.